You have to adjust your camera.
What do I do now? Okay, fine. Um, Can't you see me? No?
Yeah, now it's
Yeah,
good.
it's because I'm reading from the screen. So maybe you go. Okay, so, okay. I'm sorry. Should I start again? And I'll go very quickly so that we
Yeah,
don't lose too much time. Yeah.
yeah, just a moment. So we are live. Thank you so much, everybody, for this. I'm really sorry. There was some technical issue, but we have sorted it out finally. So welcome back again. So we'll continue. We'll start the lecture from the beginning, but because we have to skip the introduction, I'll just introduce our speaker. She is Ishita Banerjee Dubey, and one of her best works that I think for every history undergrad is a book called A History of Modern India that you can see, Cambridge University Press, that you all of you must read. So that's how I'll introduce Ishitadi. But we have more time after the lecture to have a conversation. So send your questions in the chat. We will be taking those questions. So without further ado, I'll share the screen and over to you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Shan. Yes, I'll be reading from the screen. So you'll just see yeah, maybe you'll see my face. Okay. Okay. So, as I said, what happened? Where did my dog go? Gosh. Now, where's my dog gone now? Yeah.
I think you just have to minimize the Zoom window and
Yeah.
you'll see your lecture.
Can you stop this shared screen for a minute so that I find my dog again? Yes. Sorry. Yes. Yes. Now I'm all set. So please put yes. Sorry about this. I told you I'm very nervous with technology. But without further ado, hello everyone, and thanks for your patience. Since, as I said, it's a group, it's an initiative by students of history who wish to explore heritage, I will start with the Cambridge Dictionary meaning of heritage. It defines heritage as features belonging to the culture of a particular society, such as traditions, languages, or buildings that were created in the past and still have historical importance. In common usage, heritage is equated with inheritance, patrimony, endowment, something that has been bequeathed, something that has come down to us. Since I will use this definition of the Cambridge Dictionary to examine the interface of history, culture, tradition, and heritage in an effort to comment on the play of power and meaning inherent in these concepts. It will allow us to consider the pitfalls and possibilities of what has been called heritage making and heritageization, both indicating processes. Heritage studies is a new and expanding field that has its proponents and detractors. Stemming from the active support and sponsorship of UNESCO of heritage and heritage sites in the 1970s, heritage studies have been critiqued both for the absence of a clear and even remotely accepted theorization of the concept of heritage and for its quote unquote presentness. There have, moreover, been considered critical reflections both on the liberal cultural ethos of multiculturalism, cosmopolitanism that shores up heritage and the simultaneous intimacy of heritage with homogenized and dominant projects of the nation state. It is important for us to take these incisive comments on heritage seriously. And here I would refer you to sort of Dubé's long essay on history and anthropology in the Oxford Research Encyclopedia, if you wish to look up these discussions for an incisive analysis of the heritage and heritage studies in anthropology and history. Very loosely, heritage is taken to be anything by means of which some kind of link, tenuous or false, may be forged with the past. The scope of heritage studies in England, for instance, ranges from war memorial in Wales to the media treatment of Princess Diana. Then do we mean by heritage? Whose need is it to forge links with the past? What kind of past and what kind of need? Is this need guided solely by the concerns of the present? Or are are there notions of heritage that span a much larger period temporally? Needless to say, these questions apply to the members of the Heritage and History Exploration Society, and I would like some of you to take up these issues during the discussion. Let us now turn to history, widely accepted as the study of the past of humankind, or if we follow Mark Bloch, the science of men in time. Why do we study history, and what do we wish to learn from it? What do pasts tell us? Are all pasts historical pasts? What is remembered and what is forgotten in our recovery of pasts? And more importantly, what is memorialized and monumentalized, and why? How does monumentalization relate to heritage and heritage making? These questions become supremely important if we keep in mind Michel Rolf-Trouillot's insightful analysis of the innate unresolved tension that inheres in history, that of the gap between action and narration. In Rolf-Trouillot's formulation, human beings participate in history both as actors and narrators. And many modern languages, including English, suggest that dual participation. Leaving aside the recent and pertinent concerns with histories of the non-human, let us focus on Rolf-Trouillot's affirmation that history involves both, and I quote, the facts of the matter, and, unquote, and, I quote again, a narrative of those facts, unquote, or in other words, what happened and that which is said to have happened. The first, what happened, places emphasis on the socio-historical process, and the second, that which is said to have happened, on our knowledge of the process or on a story of it. This dual presence and the inherent tension between the two make silences an integral part of history. Any event enters history with some of its parts missing, and what gets constructed as the fact of the event does so with its own inborn absences specific to its production. This is, I just quoted Rolf-Trouillot again, but it's not as if the academic discipline of history is unaware of its tension. If we look at the history of history, there have been continuous debates and self-reflection on the method and content of history, which, history continues to, let's say, carry on with these debates and about what should be the content of history, what should be the method of history. And not only that, we have, left behind ideas of the facts of the matter and move towards a more hermeneutical conception of history, which is also an interpretation of those facts. Okay. Now, so this raises a further issue, what we say that any event enters history with some of its parts missing, and what gets constructed as the fact of the event does so with its own inborn absences specific to its production. This raises a further issue of what constitutes an event in history. A dramatic occurrence of great significance, a happening that occasions a before and an after, that in turn shape understandings of the past and the present. What kinds of afterlives do these events acquire to sometimes get transformed into metaphor? And how are they conserved in memory? Finally, how do they influence the recovery of past in terms of patrimony or heritage? Learning from Shahid Amin's brilliant work, Event Metaphor Memory, on the riot of Chauri Chaura riot, quote unquote, and extending it, I will excavate a less known event and its protagonist of 16th century Odisha to track their afterlives and reverberations in ebullient myth making. Ishan, the next slide, please. Thank you. What comes to mind when we speak of Odisha? Puri and the temple of Lord Jagannath. Maybe the next one, Ishan. Thanks. Yes, thank you. What comes to mind when we speak of Odisha? Puri and the temple of Lord Jagannath, the sea that makes Puri as a site of pilgrimage doubly attractive, the Sun Temple at Konark, and other temples of unique, intricate architecture, mostly credited to rulers of the southern Ganga dynasty. In other words, images and associations that can be identified as quote unquote Hindu. Jagannath, the Lord of the universe, and the Rashtra Devata, the state deity of Odisha for centuries, has increasingly become the epitome of Oriya cultural identity, with Odisha being proclaimed as a region that withstood Muslim invasion, quote unquote, the longest. Texts on Odishan history routinely reiterate the fact that the Odishan kingdom was the last mighty Hindu kingdom to fall only 3 years after the fall of Vijayanagara in the south. Why is it important to stress the Hinduness of Odisha? Is Odisha singularly Hindu? To address these issues, I'll take you on a journey along the layered and intertwined, yet disparate and discrepant legends, tales, histories, and literary expressions surrounding Kalapahar, a 16th century iconoclast, an enigmatic figure whose name evoked fear and fascination all over Eastern India till the 20th century. Ishan, could you pass the slide that has the representations of Kalapahar? Yes, thank you. So Kalapahar, literally Black Mountain, with an intricate interface with Nilachal, Blue Mountain, a name frequently used for Puri, finds entry into histories of Odisha through an event of great magnitude. His attack and desecration of the temple of Jagannath, plunder of the temple treasure, the Ratna Bhandar, and possibly a subsequent burning of the images of the Jagannath Trinity. Kalapahar is significant because his attack on the temple and the destruction of the images occasions a rupture in the linear, unbroken, Jagannath-centered history of Odisha from the 12th century on. This spectacular event and the unthinkable act of the burning of the images transforms him into the very embodiment of an alarming iconoclast who willfully destroys works of religious art and transforms him into a metaphor of ferocity and vengeance. What occasioned the attack? Historians such as Jadunath Sarkar contend that it was rivalry between the Mughals in Delhi and the Afghan sultans of Gaur, Bengal, that occasioned the attack. Akbar, acknowledging the might of the Odishan kingdom, had entered into an alliance with Raja Mukunda Deva in 1565 against their common enemy, Sultan Suleiman Karrani of Bengal. Karrani's regime, in Sarkar's words, had acquired unwanted strength, becoming one dominating power in northeastern India, with territories stretching from the Kutch frontier to Puri in Odisha and from the Son to the Brahmaputra. Akbar's alliance with Mukunda Deva aroused the ire of Sultan Karrani, who waited for an opportunity. In the winter of 1567-68, when the Mughal army was occupied with the siege of Chittor, Suleiman sent an expedition to Orissa that resulted in the defeat and death of Mukunda Deva. Would you please pass the slide with where I show the history books, please? I'll be quoting and unquoting, Jadunath Sarkar. Yes, thank you. So the invading Afghan army then, and I quote, sent off a strong detachment under Kalapahar, alias Raju, from the neighborhood of Jajpur, which was then the capital of North Orissa, to raid the temple of Jagannath, famous for the wealth accumulated in it. With the royal house in confusion and the people of Puri, and this is interesting, with the royal house in confusion and the people of Puri lulled into security by centuries of freedom from foreign attack, hardly any resistance was offered. On hearing of the advance of Muslims, Sarkar tells us, the people of Puri are believed to have said, what sort of strange creatures are these Musalman people? And can they have the power to harm this God? The historian Prabhat Mukherjee, who published a detailed account of Kalapahar in the Orissa Historical Research Journal in 1952, coincides with Sarkar in stating that the attack on Puri was preceded by an attack on Cuttack that had resulted in the defeat and the death of Raja Mukunda Deva in 1568. Mukherjee, however, totally dismisses Sarkar's statement that the Musalmans were totally unknown to the inhabitants of Odisha as unfounded. In Mukherjee's narrative, on hearing of Kolapahar's approach, Raja Divya Simha, the successor of Mukundadeva, removed the images of the Jagannath Trinity from the temple and hid them in an island in the Chilika lake. Kolapahar proceeded to the island, brought back the images, probably with the help of an Odia, and this is a quotation, and desecrated the temple at Puri. He also burnt the images and threw the remains either in the river Ganges in Bengal or in the sea near Kujang in Odisha, according to differing accounts in the Madala Panji, the chronicle of the Jagannath temple, and Abul Fazl's Aini Akbari. Historians who have followed the printed edition of the Madala Panji accept that the image of Jagannath was carried to Bengal and publicly burnt on the bank of the river Hooghly. An Odia named Bisara Mohanty is credited with recovering the Brahma Padartha, the life substance, from the bust of the image. He hid it in his drum and brought it to Kujanga in southern Orissa, where it was kept and worshipped till the time it was renewed by Raja Ramachandra Dev I, the Raja of Khurda, in 1590. We will come back to this soon. Could you return, Ishan, to the map of Orissa that shows the different places I'm mentioning? Thank you. It bears mention here that the manuscript of the Madala Panji makes a passing reference to Kolapahar Allahabad, a general of Siliman Karani and his attack on the temple of Jagannath, in a section titled Rajbhog Itihasa. Orissan texts such as the Kakata Rajavamsavali also referred to Kalapahar, but the most flourishing accounts come from Persian sources that underwent embellishment over time. This went hand in hand with the growth of a large corpus of diverse stories, legends, and lore. And I use lore because some historians have made a distinction between Janashruti, which is lore, and rumor or hearsay. And according to them, the first has some historical basis and veracity, and the second often does not have that historical basis. Anyway, so this, the embellishment that Kalapahar and his powers received in Persian sources went hand in hand with the growth of a large corpus of diverse stories, legends, and lore around Kalapahar that made him a liminal, frightening, and enthralling figure in different and contradictory relations with Hindu divinities. Tales about Kolapahar's daring destruction of Jagannath had reached such proportions over the 17th and 18th centuries that in 1788, Ghulam Hussain Salim claimed that the very sound of Kolapahar's drum made Hindu idols lose their hands and feet and ears and noses. Even in the closing years of the 18th century, stone idols with broken hands and feet and ears and noses cut off could be found in several parts of the country. This dangerous potency of Kolapahar's kettle drum also featured in Stirling's account of Odisha in 1825 and in an early history of Odisha published in 1879. You saw the three books you saw. The first was the history of Odisha, in Odia, published in Pyari Mohan Acharya. Okay. Could you pass the representations of Devi Sambaleswari, please? Thank you. On a different note, legends current in the Sambalpur region credits the two tutelary goddesses of the king of Sambalpur with saving the king when Korapahar invaded his territory and laid siege to his fort. The goddesses appeared as milkmaids in Korapahar's camp, offered poison curd to him and his other Muslim generals. The generals took the curd and died. This tale of triumph of the goddesses had an unexpected ending. The tombs of some of the generals killed by the goddesses turned into shrines venerated by the people of the region. The slide on the Muslim shrines, please. Thank you. The tomb of Bukhari Sahib Saeed Ali Bukhari, a general of Karapahar, slain during the siege of the Barbati fort in Cuttack and not by the Devis of Sambalpur, was still a revered shrine in Kaipadar of Puri district when Prabhat Mukherjee wrote his article in the early 1950s. My brief survey of Muslim shrines, and I use quote unquote Muslim all through, and we'll soon come to that. My brief survey of Muslim shrines in the coastal regions of Odisha in 2011 also revealed that the tomb of Bukhari Sahib continued to be revered, although it had lost some of its grandeur. According to Mahatab Ali, a former minister of culture in Orissa under the Congress regime, who gave me a lot of time during my trip to Bhubaneswar in 2011, Bukhari Sahib had actually come from Afghanistan during the reign of Ramachandra Deva I, who became the ruler of the Khurda region after Orissa had come under Mughal rule in 1592. This was also the time when Takki Khan, the son-in-law of Nawab Shujauddin of Bengal and the Subadar of Bihar and Orissa, settled in Orissa, attracted quote unquote Muslims of different hues. I mean, it's not quote unquote here, it is different Muslims of different hues from Bihar and UP, civil and military administrators, peers, and saints. Most Muslim settlements and mosques and shrines owe their origin to this period. Historical records barely mention Takki Khan, although lore and legends conflate Korapahar and Takki Khan as destroyers of temples and idols. Iconoclasts also bent on looting the temple treasure. A short essay titled Takki Khan and Lord Jagannatha, published in the e-magazine of the Odisha government, titled Odisha Review, and this essay was published in 2016, portrays Takki Khan as a greedy Muslim, a very ordinary but greedy Muslim, bent on looting the Ratna Bhandar of the temple. Details the several tactics he deployed, including passing as a Hindu devotee and the recurrent obstacles he faced in carrying out his objective. Finally, when Takki did manage to hide inside the temple and enter the inner sanctum to steal the jewels from the idols at the dead of night, he was dazzled and almost blinded by the glow, the rage coming from the eyes of Lord Jagannath, endearingly called Chokadora, the one with large circular eyes in Orissa. The blinding gaze was accompanied by the vision of hissing snakes rushing towards Takki Khan. Takki fell unconscious and was discovered by the priests next day. From the time he recovered consciousness, Takki Khan became a true devotee of Lord Jagannath. Takki Khan's greed for the temple jewels and treasure finds a close parallel with Jadunath Sarkar's depiction of Korapahar's lure for the jewels that adorn the deities and his loot of several images of gold from the Ratna Simhasan of the temple as booty, an assertion not borne out by facts. Let us continue with the build-up of the emblematic iconoclast. In legends, drama, and short stories in Odia and Bangla, Korapahar is referred to as Raju and Kalachand Roy or Kalidas Gajadani, a Hindu Brahmin who fell in love with Dulari or Dulia, the daughter of Sultan Karrani, and married her. This resulted in his ostracization, and Brahmin Pandits of the Mukti Mandap Sabha of Puri scornfully rejected his prayer to commit penance, seek expiation, and return to the Hindu fold. Thanks, Ishan. Thwarted and insulted, Kalachand turned him into a thwarted and insulted, Kalachand turned into a ferocious iconoclast, Korapahar. This tale has had different variations in Odisha and Bengal, but the fact of his Hindu birth remains constant. If Persian accounts magnified his potency against Hindu gods and goddesses, Hindu quote unquote, Hindu histories in Odia and Bangla embellished Kolapahar's extreme villainy in distinct ways. Pyari Mohan Acharya's Odisha Itihasa, History of Odisha, published in 1879, was the first to affirm that Korapahar was born a Hindu Brahmin and converted to Islam after falling in love with a Muslim princess. Acharya makes no mention of his humiliation at the hands of the Brahmins of the Mukti Mandap Sabha of Puri. At the same time, he claims that Korapahar's notorious kettle drum was made with cowhide. Acharya also records a rhyme that alludes to Korapahar's arrival, his breaking of an iron door, drinking of the water of Mahanadi. Implicit in it is probably he desecrated the water of the sacred Mahanadi, but it's not stated. So this rhyme alludes to Korapahar's arrival, his breaking of an iron door, drinking of the water of Mahanadi, and forcing the queen of the slain Raja Mukunda Deva to serve him beef on a golden plate. Acts of immense import that magnifies the iconoclast vileness. And here again, the implicit, the indication is that the queen was also forced to become a concubine of Korapahar. This rhyme, it bears mention, has been repeated and reproduced over and over again in texts on Orishan history, and also modified in the second decade of the 20th century to change Hera, beef, into Hira, diamond, to soften the blow on Oriya sensibilities. Durgacharan Sanyal's Bangla Shamajik Itihas, Social History of Bengal, published in 1910, added further kinks to the Korapahar tales. Here, the raiding and destroying of temples and idols in Bengal, Assam, and Odisha were accompanied by the abduction and rape of Hindu women. Korapahar's zeal was such that he went as far as Kashi, Banaras, where an unexpected incident changed the course of his life. After an aunt of Korapahar, violated by the raiding Muslims, went to him and revealed her identity, a suitably chastised Korapahar called for an immediate stop to the desecration and devastation, and miraculously disappeared the following day. Although nothing is known for sure about his disappearance, writes Durgacharan Sannal, legends hint that he had taken to the life of an ascetic to atone for his sins. Prior to Sanyal's social history, the renowned actor and dramatist Girish Chandra Ghosh, the next slide, please, Aishan. Thank you. Prior to Sanyal's social history, the renowned actor and dramatist Girish Chandra Ghosh had written and staged a play in the Star Theatre of Kolkata in 1896, in which the meager account of vandalism of Korapahar, and here I'm quoting and citing a review that appeared in the Statesman, the newspaper Statesman. Okay, so here, in this drama, this play of 1896, the meager account of vandalism of Korapahar was superseded by bhakti evoked in him by the teachings of Ramakrishna Paramhansa, a historical play suffused with bhakti ras, the mood of bhakti, devotion, that proclaimed the triumph of faith as the way to God. And here is another interesting twist. Kora of Odia, here in Bangla, which is black in Odia, Kora is kalo in Bangla, but here it has become Kala Pahar. Kala in Bangla is deaf. So it's as if someone who doesn't hear, so it's Kala Pahar who's ignorant, and then through Ramakrishna Paramhansa, he changes and he gains both knowledge, and he changes into this true bhakti. So and the announcement and the publicity for the theater said only faith can lead one to God. I have those. I did have that announcement, that publicity, but I couldn't find it. So unfortunately, when I was doing this, this PowerPoint. Anyway, in early 20th century Bengal, poetic imagination turned Korapahar into the all-conquering Juga avatar, the avatar of the epoch, a frightening epochal incarnation whose power, glow, and strength make mountains bow down, the suns glow pale, and gods and priests tremble with fear. Korapahar, the audacious man-lion avatar, had appeared to do away with stifling tradition and errors of centuries, made human hearts beat again by removing the weight of superstitious fear of hell, and turn the world upside down. This is from a collection of poems by Mohitlal Majumdar, published again in the early decades of the 20th century. In Odia plays and stories written between the 1920s and 1970s, and here I am generalizing a bit, I'm aware, but in Odia plays and stories written between the 1920s and 1970s, the liminality and nuances surrounding Korapahar get somewhat diffused with depictions that are either empathetic to a person whose turn to vengeance is consequent upon his disregard and humiliation by the priests of Puri, or are full of wrath about the vileness of an iconoclast who does not stop at destroying temples and idols, but also violates Hindu women. Beginning with Prabhat Mukherjee, late 20th century historians have formed these legends, checked them for historical veracity, and arrived at different conclusions. All of them discard the idea of Kolapahar's Hindu birth. They proclaim him to be a full-blooded Afghan, and also some claim that Raju is a name commonly used by Afghans, and also contend that Korapahar is a title rather than a name, a fact corroborated by Mahatab Ali, who mentioned that Munir Korapahar was a title of all Muslim residents of a village lying between Khorda and Chilika. For Hermann Kuhlke, member of the first Odisha research project founded by the German Research Council, the Madala Panji makes use of Korapahar only to uphold the indestructibility of Jagannath, to indicate that Korapahar only managed to destroy the wooden image of the Lord. His life substance, Brahma Padartha, survived to be brought back and reinstated in the temple idol by the successors of the Gajapatis of Odisha. The Madala Panji credits Ramachandra Deva I with reinstating the worship of Jagannath in the temple at the end of the 16th century. In Kulke's reckoning, however, it was actually a Muslim Subadar who, with the help of temple priests, and all these connections are important. So it was actually a Muslim Subadar who, with the help of temple priests, managed to bring back the life substance from its hiding place in southern Orissa and had it reinstated in Puri in 1735. This was after the cult of Jagannath and Puri had become the fulcrum of a tripartite struggle between the Rajas of Khurda, the priests of the temple, and the Muslim Subadars at Cuttack. Gaganendranath Das, on the other hand, sees in the stories of Korapahar attempts by the ritual functionaries of the temple to underscore the dangers inherent in the growing rigidity in the practices of the temple and to advocate the reconversion of Hindus. If the potency of Korapahar's kettle drum grew in magnitude in Persian sources over the 17th and 18th centuries, the single mention of Korapahar in the manuscript of the Madala Panji was embellished by temple priests over the late 16th and 17th centuries to insist on the perils of making the Jagannath cult too rigid and of not allowing Hindu converts who sought expiation through penance to return to the Hindu fold. Kailash Chandra Das argues in a recent essay that the twists in the legends of Korapahar were added only in the late 18th and early 19th centuries to bolster the linked efforts at social reform and reform of Hinduism in the 19th century. Till the end of the 18th century, he states, Korapahar's Afghan birth was not very widely known. Hence, writers and reformers could innocuously introduce the quote-unquote fact of Korapahar's conversion to Islam and his subsequent dangerous turn against Hindu Dharma from the end of the 18th century to counter conversion and argue in favor of a reformed Hinduism. Such efforts acquired greater significance over the 19th century, so much so that the lore, Janashruti around Korapahar, his conversion and attack on the Jagannath temple, found its way into Oriya newspapers in the 1880s and 90s. In 1881, it bears pointing out, there was another incident of quote-unquote attack on the temple of Jagannath, this time by a group of very marginal men and women from the Sambalpur region, lay followers of a new radical dharma, a story we can leave for the discussion. For Kailash Das, the fact of the Rani of Mukunda Deva offering stiff resistance becomes significant. This provides us with yet another example of the different ways historians interpret and recount facts. Kailadash also says that the change from Hera, beef, to Hira, made by an earlier historian, is again not used by all quote unquote nationalist historians of Odisha. Godavarish Mishra, for example, uses in when he recounts the rhyme, goes back to Hera and not Hira. And leaving aside historians' concerns with Korapahar and what they did or did Korapahar and what he did or did not do to the cult of Jagannath and quote unquote Hinduism, let us explore the discrete groundings of the persona metaphor of Korapahar Takki Khan rolled into one. Just as Bukhari Sahib continues to be a revered shrine visited by subordinate groups, the Muslim shrines, please again. Just as Bukhari Sahib continues to be Ishan. Yes, thank you. The Muslim shrines. Yes, thank you. No, this is not. Yes. No. Do you see Kadam Rasul and Bukhari Sahib? Yeah. Okay. So just as Bukhari Sahib continues to be a revered shrine visited by subordinate groups of people of different communities, Kadam-e-Rasul, the shrine at Katak that also houses Takki Khan's Samadhi tomb, features among the most potent shrines in fulfilling people's prayers, wishes, and vows. Why? Kadam-e-Rasul is associated with a fakir or peer who is believed to have been in possession of a pot of water that had the Pada Chinho of Prophet Muhammad. This water, drunk and applied to the body of Takki Khan's Rani, who had suffered for long from an incurable disease, cured her. A relieved and content Takki Khan made a grant of 1,000 acres of land to the Pir, the side of Kadam-e-Rasul. Famed to be a place that fulfills prayers and vows, this site, Mohtab Ali mentioned as an aside, has more Hindu visitors than Muslims. In a similar manner, Orthodox Muslims who have gone on Hajj do not visit Bukhari Sahib. And then there is Jahania Pir, who saved Puri and an extremely worried king from disaster by stopping the sea from sweeping into Puri by means of his charisma, a tale also recounted with the name of Kabir attached to it. The shrine of Jahania Pir is located in Kakatpur, Ashtaranga, very close to the sea in the district of Puri. A new tourist site for its location on the beach, the web page of Jahania Pir proclaims that the shrine follows no particular religion and is visited by both Hindus and Muslims. The varied lore and legends of Korapahar, scholars commented during a discussion that followed a talk of mine in the Bhubaneswar branch of the National Archives in 2016, are current not just in Sambalpur, but also straddle Ganjam and regions far away from Puri and the temple, creating, as it were, an inverted kind of sacred geography. These traces are subjugated, are written over by an overwhelming focus on Jagannath. Before we can conclude, the next slide, please, Ishan. Okay. No, the ones on Jagannath. Yes, thank you. Before we conclude, let us take a closer look at Jagannath. Widely acknowledged to be a Shavara Devata who changed from Neela Madhav to Purushottam Jagannath. Jagannath is Buddha Jagannath, the ninth incarnation of Vishnu, only in Odisha. In classical formulation of Vishnu's avatars, we are aware the ninth incarnation is the Buddha of Buddhism. It bears mention here that current Odisha, parts of ancient Kalinga, also houses Dantapura, an important Buddhist site, and that is meant to house the tooth relic of the Buddha, an important Buddhist site, and Buddhism continues to retain a significant presence in Odisha. Puri, moreover, not just the Dham of Vishnu Jagannath, it is at once Sri Kshetra, the Kshetra dedicated to Sri, Lakshmi, and a site of Shakti and Tantra. Devi Vimala, the tantric goddess, is the presiding deity of the Jagannath temple compound. And the ritual functionaries of the temple, starting from the Raja of Puri, the first Sevak, the Adya Sevak, worship the Devi in a different manifestations as their Ishta Devata, personal deity. Let us now try and cull out certain strands from these intertwined, jumbled, and connected paths. Liminal, betwixt, and mixed up figures such as Karapahar Takki Khan and lore about them abound in all parts of India. The work of my friend and fellow historian Shudipto Sen on the many lives of Zafar Khan, the Ghazi of Tribeni in Bengal, provides a lucid example. The question for us, therefore, is why and how do these mixed up and layered paths result in histories that are demarcated and separated? What happens if we do not start with preconceived notions of what is Hindu and what is Muslim, and try not to view them through the tropes of idolatry and iconoclasm, as Shudipto Sen puts it? Do the palimpsests with visible traces of discrete blends and mixes induce us to think of indeterminate and multivocal pasts? Multivocal, here I'm trying to get at the fact that what happens if we really try and let the past speak. So do these palimpsests with visible traces of discrete blends and mixes induce us to think of indeterminate and multivocal pasts? And do these polyvalent and multi-layered paths that can simultaneously speak of harmony and conflict? It's very important. It's not just one or the other. These are mixed, connected, jumbled. They can simultaneously speak of harmony and conflict and of innumerable negotiations and accommodation, give new meanings to our notions of heritage, and inflect the ways we set about exploring and constructing heritage. And finally, does an awareness of the play of power in the production of history and the absences and silences innate in historical retrieval help in constructions of diverse and open-ended narratives? I leave you to ponder these questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dee, for that wonderful lecture. And I was thinking about various, as you rightly said, that there can be heritage making at any part of the nation. And I remembered that during the smallpox uh, kind of pandemic, there was this creation of Sheetla Devi. A legend was made, and the genealogy was traced to Brahma. It was said the Brahma's daughter is Sheetla Mata, and she was then prayed. Last year there was a Corona Devi at some part of India. People are praying. So I think these legends and myths are very interesting. But this leads us to a question that these society, especially Odisha, was a tribal society at one point of time, and then there was a system of Brahmanization, and there's also took Jagannath Puri system with it. So, do you think that it was a counter to that kind of narrative, the legend of Kalapahad, to counter the Brahmanical narrative?
Actually, I mean, if we follow Gaganendranath Das, it's not to counter the Brahmanical narrative. It's actually to show what happens if Jagannath, if the Lord of all becomes ceases to be the Lord of all. It is more to uphold the idea of the Jagannath. See what happens when Hindu Brahmins who converted on account of love or whatever other reason, then they want to continue to remain Hindus, but are ostracized. So see what happens. So but you see, that is the danger. It's not this or that, as I said towards the end. It's this and that, and that is what we have to work towards. And that is why, thinking of partly of Sanjay Subramanian's connected histories, that's why I called it connected past, disconnected histories. How do we connect these histories? Actually, there is a separation when we try and connect. This is Hindu, this is Muslim. And then you have now, of course, there are many who are speaking of how Buddhism was suppressed. If you see the Lion Temple, the Lion Gate of the Puri Mandir, there's the elephant and then there's the tiger. So they said this is a clear sign of, the subjugation of Buddhism. Again, that's what I'm saying. We do not know. Why do we read them as histories or narratives only of fierce, attack and subjugation? These are layered tales. These are layered tales. And that's what I'm saying. How do we allow our past to speak? How do we rid ourselves of our own preconceptions before we begin to explore? Not rid ourselves, but at least be aware of the way we are approaching our own past and narratives and the present, because there's always a concern of the present that then imposes, the way, that imposes its own conditions on how and what past we try to recover.
Yeah, and I think you also mentioned the rigidity of the society might also have an impact on the creation of this myth, this story.
Yes, actually, there's another very interesting story. The ones who visited Puri, there's the image of the Patit Pavan at the entrance to the Lion Gate, and this is precisely for the people who were not allowed to go inside the temple. So this Patit Pavan legend again is connected with Ramachandra Dev II, and again a story of love. And with the Muslim princes, you saw the two representations of Bada Pahar. One is like black and dark and demon, and the other is, think of the play of light and dark, of white, fairness and darkness, all these things. The other one is again his love of Muslim princes. But Patit Pavan it is stated that Ramachandra Deva again couldn't believe that he would be ostracized. And this is the Raja of Puri. This is Ramachandra Deva II. And again, to answer or fulfill his desire, he said he could not survive by not seeing Jagannath, is that when the image of the Patit Pavan is installed. So, yeah.
There's another representation of Kalapad that that he converted to Islam. He became a Muslim, but then he again wanted to become a Hindu. But the pujaris of the Jagannath temple said you can't reconvert, and that's how he attacked the Jagannath Puri temple. That's another myth that goes for Kala Pahad.
Yes, and it's not just the pujaris, it's the Brahmins of the Mukti Mandap Sabha who are meant to be like the highest of the Sasana villages. Yeah, it's the Brahmins of the Mukti Mandap Sabha who said that you cannot. So yes, but again, the point is we come back. What happens if we don't look at these stories through the tropes of just conversion, of iconoclasm and idolatry, what do the betwixt, the in-between nature of these tales? Because all along you will find also the legends associated is that some Odia or the other is betraying Lord Jagannath by helping all these, either Karapahar or Takika. And then there's another, some other Odia who's recovering, who's saving Jagannath. And again, if we follow Kulka, the Brahma Padartha is brought back to Puri by the Subadar with the help of Odia. So these are all mixed tales. That's why I'm saying different negotiations. It's not just harmony, it's not just hunky-dory, but it's not just conflict. So.
There are so many questions from the audience, so I'll now read out some of them. Tirtha Prasad Mukhopadhyay says, does not Kala also mean black or dark, as in Krishna Kala, a concept germane to Vaishnava poetry? Would you consider Girish Ghosh's play as a syncretic text or a Hindu text?
Well, thank you, Tirtha, for joining in first. I don't like the word syncretic at all. I'll tell you why. Again, we start with notions of one tradition and another tradition as totally separate integral units. and the two come together. And that is syncretism. My point is precisely that that they are not as they're composite. They're composite. They are built, there are blends, they are so blended that you cannot say this is Hindu, because who are we speaking of? The Afghans and then the Mughals. There are Shias, Sunnis. This is a struggle actually between the Afghans, who were very powerful in Bengal, and the Mughal emperors. And the Subadars, again, they are not the Afghan rulers. Think of Sher Shah Suri also ruling over the Bihar region for a long time. No. Now, Kala, yes and no. Why yes and no? Yes, Kala of Krishna, yes. But Girish Ghosh himself had become a bhakta of Ramakrishna. And in the novel, he does say it's that he's Kala, deaf. He does not hear the words. But yes, what it is evocative of is the power of bhakti, of devotion, of turning even let's say the worst kind of fearsome iconoclast into a true devotee. That's one. And the other is what was I going to say? Yes, the thing of Takki Khan, who's chastised by the power of Lord Jagannath. In Girish Ghosh, you don't have that chastisement. It's, Girish Ghosh himself plays kind of, Chintamani, who everyone says is the figure, is based on Ramakrishna Paramahansa. So, yes, this is the time, if you go back to the history of nationalism, yes, Kailash Das is right. We are going back to historical novels at this time. And Girish Ghosh actually has just moved from another theater to Star Theater, and he needs a play, and he doesn't have a play. He's already written Shivaji and Rana Pratap. Huh? There's a third one, so it's like a stopgap thing. He's attracted to Ramakrishna, and he writes this play. Anyway, sorry, I shouldn't go on. I don't know if I could answer you, Tirtha, but yes, that's how I would see. I don't like the word syncretism very much. Carry on. More questions, please.
Yeah, but that does make for a great lecture, the use of myths in national movement. Krishnakant Lahangir says, is it possible that different Kala Pahad stories intended to promote Jagannath culture and Odisha nationalism?
Yes and no. Yes and no. If we think of it that way, you see, it's like Subarna Thalare Heda Porsari, no? In a golden plate, the Rani of Mukunda Dev serves beef. Then another, poet historian changes it to Hira, because this is associated with Kalapahar's greed for the jewels of the temple and the ideals. Then it is turned back again. But these can be interpreted very differently, very differently. Yes, a Jagannath-centered, nationalism, Oriya nationalism, which is not just Hindu. There's a linked project of the Bhasha Andolan. Oriyas are also fighting for the different parts of Odisha, which fell under different administrative units under the East India Company, for one combined, one administrative unit. And what do they go for? Again, Jagannath. The speakers of Oriya are the inhabitants of the Rashtra of Lord Jagannath. So there are many kind of flows, strains that flow into this, but not everyone. What was Godavarish Mishra doing by saying that, let's not hurt, I don't care about whether Oriya sensibilities are hurt or not, let's bring back what he thinks is the original rhyme. But yes, Jagannath increasingly has taken over, but then there are other reverberations also. There are many repercussions, and not only are there Savara priests in Puri, who holds sway actually during, this is very, very interesting, during the, before the Ratha Yatra ceremony. And you mentioned Sitala. After the Snan Jatra is very interesting. They take this bath, it's very hot, and they get fever. And they are kept inside. This is the time when their idols are made of wood, right? So they are repaired, because as you know, the Navakalevar happens much later, and it also depends on whether the Raja of Puri can spend the time. And anyway, so this is the time, but it is, what is it called? The Daya of Shitala Mata, that they've got fever. And during this time, the temple doors are closed, and the only ones who can go and who hold sway are the Shavara priests, not the Brahmin priests. And even for the Rath Yatra, it's very interesting, the ones who bring out the images and stuff. Anyway, so there are, again, as I said, very many layered tales. We do not know what kind of permutation combination that went into the making of Jagannath. There are, tribal Odisha, for example, in the Bhasha Andolan and Odisha becoming one state, people are saying that, very many languages spoken by the large Adivasi population, again, kind of got suppressed in this projection of, Odisha or Orias. So all kinds of works are going on. But as my point is, yes, there was suppression, but there was also negotiation of different orders. And how do we, since you are interested in excavating, how do we bring back? It is our duty to also not see them only through, the intention of Oriental nationalists or of historians. Yes, we are conditioned by our concerns. We are, including selecting the theme that we wish to study or recover. It's a political act. We are conscious. Why did I go for the Mahima Dharmis and then move to the cult of Jagannath and not the other way around? Right? Anyway, so.
Thank you so much, Didi. We'll take one more question. It's by Ofira. Thank you for the fascinating lecture question. Can you perhaps tell us a bit about your idea of disconnections and how it counter relates to the connected histories model?
See, as I said, connected histories, of course, I've used it a lot. Not as if there weren't connections. Yes, there are connections. But the only problem there is that it kind of is a very, very rosy picture, that everything was fine. There were ideas traveling, no doubt about that. But what kind of circulation? And this is, this Sanjay Subramanian is also coming from the idea, he has a very strong critique of the colonial period being overworked, and has been, like, literally, he thinks, why this overemphasis on the colonial period, and we need to go back to the pre-colonial. And his idea of the pre-modern is precisely that if you're thinking of a break and a rupture, it happens much before, with the age of discoveries, etc. So yes, there are connections. And he's also added the important point, which is very valuable, that the world was connected and globalized in a different kind of way. The India Ocean region, of course, it's a very valuable point. But yes, there are connections. Yes, there, ideas, people are traveling, the sense of the apocalypse and all that, ruptures happening. But how? That is why, I pick on, as I said, I've learned a lot, and I continue to use his texts when I teach and write. But the point is how, and the how actually, throws up a different picture. There are very many tales. It's not just a world, of hunky-dory of people traveling. There is suppression, there is subjugation, there's conquest. Let's not forget conquest, because now, after years in Mexico, I have got interested in the two colonizations. The pre-Enlightenment colonization, the early colonization, and the late colonization of the British Empire and the Spanish Empire. The two very different ones, and yet there are connections. But these are also histories of subjugation and suppression. So that's my only problem. And which is why I gave this example of, when we read all these legends, it's always Hindu and Jagannath and the terrible Muslim. Why? When, stories are telling us different things, not just one.
Thank you so much, Deep, for that wonderful Q&A and for the lecture. And we could not have hoped for a better start of the third year of Caravan Online. And we hope that we'll also do some offline event. And once you are in Delhi, we'll host you for another offline event, hopefully, if things are better, if we do not see another wave of COVID. But thank you so much for taking your time to deliver this lecture. It's truly an honor hosting you.
No, not at all. Thank you very much for your initiative. And I hope you continue with your love and passion for history and for past and for heritage and for what is happening to India now as well.
Thank
If
you
I
so much.
look at India of now with these pasts and histories. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining in. Yes.
Thank you so much, everybody. And I'll end the live now, but we'll meet again for another lecture. We have 2 more lectures coming up on the 7th and on I think on 9th of April and then on 13th of April. So do look out for that. There are some amazing sessions. I won't disclose the details now, but you all can go on our Instagram page, which you also have to follow to look into all the lectures that are upcoming. And we also are doing one offline lecture per month. So last week we had our first offline session since 2020. That was a Kabir discussion on 15th century poet philosopher Kabir with Professor Purushottam Agrawal and Professor Harbans Mukhia. But we'll continue to do more such sessions. For that, we'll need donations. So do help us out with the donations. The link will be sent if you want. You all can comment and we'll share the link for the donation. And thank you so much, everybody, for always supporting Caravan.